No. All right.
Ready? Yes, sir.
Good morning. I'm here with my colleagues, Senator Reed from Rhode Island, who's the ranking Democrat on Armed Services, Senator Menendez from New Jersey, who is the ranking Democrat on Foreign Relations. Institutionally, these gentlemen are a big deal. They represent the voice of the Democratic Party on the Armed Services Committee and the Foreign Relations Committee, which deals with foreign policy. I am from South Carolina, as you can tell, and I have tried to help President Trump where I can. Will continue to do so, and I want him to be successful, but I find myself in a situation where the best way I can help the president is to tell him the truth as I see it. So there's a statement by the president today that the idea that Russia, Assad, and Iran are not really happy about us leaving. I disagree with that. They're ecstatic. The only reason they're not dancing in the aisles in Tehran and ISIS camps is they just don't believe in dancing. This is a big gift to them, and this is a devastating decision for our allies. The president tweeted out today some frustration. People should fight more. He's right. People should pay more. He's right. But when you find somebody who will fight with you, you need to reward them. You need to stick with them. I would challenge the president or anyone else to say that the Kurdish forces and the Arab forces in the Syrian Democratic Force have not fought well. So I have a letter going to the Secretary of Defense, Secretary of State, and the Chairman of the Joint Chiefs asking the question, what happens to our Kurdish allies if we completely withdraw now? What happens to the approximately 700 foreign fighters in Syrian Democratic Forces control who are all hardened jihadists from Europe? We need answers to these questions. So the good news is there's growing bipartisan support to ask the president to reverse course and to have a conditions-based withdrawal. All three of us support the idea of withdrawing from Syria and everywhere else when you can do it safely. It is in our national security interest not to withdraw at this time, in my view, because if you do so now, the Kurdish fighters, the Kurdish forces, will be decimated by Turkey, Assad, or maybe ISIS. It is clear to me that if you withdraw now, based on the conditions on the ground, Iran is a big winner inside of Syria. A corridor between Tehran to Lebanon will exist to funnel weapons to Hezbollah and other forces aligned against Israel. And most importantly, none of us believe that ISIS has been defeated. Now, two Democrats and one Republican saying the same thing. The war has not yet been won. The 2,200 in Syria are performing vital national security functions for us, which includes support for a key ally called the Kurds, and is an insurance policy against the rise of ISIS in Syria. And to me, we are all worried about the consequences of this decision regarding Russia, Iran, and Assad. So this resolution, the resolve clause, basically asks the president to reverse course, make any future decisions on withdrawing from Syria based on conditions on the ground after consulting with his national security team. We all share the same goal of withdrawing from Syria. We just want to do it in an appropriate fashion. And finally, as to the decision itself, I landed yesterday morning coming back from Afghanistan. And if anyone tells me that ISIS has been destroyed in Afghanistan, we're going to have a serious conversation. Our goal is to withdraw from Afghanistan based on conditions on the ground that will let us leave honorably and safely. This decision, I believe, has been made by the president, not with sound military advice against it. I think his entire national security team has expressed concerns about withdrawing now. As with President Obama, I advised him to listen to your commanders. A residual force in Iraq made sense to me. And I told him, I'm a Republican, you're a Democrat, but you'll get a lot of support from Senator McCain and myself if you followed the advice. Unfortunately, he did not. The rest is history. As to President Trump, I will help you any way I can, wherever I can. But because you're a Republican, I'm not going to ignore what I believe. I'm going to give you an honest evaluation. was willing to support a Democrat if he followed sound military advice. I'm willing to fight a Republican if he don't. This is not about me. It's not about my two colleagues here. It's about our nation. And I don't want to hear any more about how much we love our troops. We all love our troops. And if you go talk to them, you will find out very quickly they understand why they need to be in Syria. They're all volunteers. They don't want to leave until the job's done. Do they miss their families? Yes. Have they suffered? Yes. Do they mourn the loss of colleagues? You better believe it. Are they willing to stay? Yes. They know better than anybody talking to you today why it's important to get this right. They have a high opinion of our Kurdish allies. I was in Syria just a few months ago, and I can tell you right now the Kurds have done a wonderful, fantastic job of being aligned with the United States, and our military advisors on the ground said, without equivocation, of all the people we partnered with, this has been our best, most reliable partner. So I can tell you in Manbij today, there are a lot of broken hearts of Americans who have looked our allies in the eye and say, we're going to stick with you. As to the decision by the president, I don't know where it came from, but it needs to be reconsidered. Ambassador Jeffries, our special envoy to Syria, a good man who was an ambassador in Iraq, just 2 days ago announced a commitment to stay until we got this right. I don't know how this decision was made. It literally came out of left field. It has rattled the world. You see North Korea flexing their muscle now about, well, why don't you leave South Korea before we do a deal? I can promise you that everything that happened in Iraq is going to happen in Syria unless we change course. And I can promise the president, if you will reevaluate this decision, you'll have a lot of support across both sides of the aisle. With that, I'll turn it over to Senator Reid.
Well, thank you, Lindsey. I'm honored to be with Lindsey and Bob, who are in the forefront of our consideration of all issues regarding national security, and echoing many of the things that Lindsey said. First, the hasty and disjointed manner of this announcement demonstrates that the administration is in disarray, and the president's ability to lead internationally is, I think, seriously eroded by this decision and by others. And simply because the president tweets that ISIS has been defeated is not the reality. We're not safer. He also continues to disregard the advice of his military, diplomatic, and intelligence personnel who have consistently warned against the action the president wants to take and is insisting that we do take. Just 2 weeks ago, General McKenzie, nominated by the president to be excuse me, the next commander of U.S. Central Command, said, ISIS probably still is more capable than al-Qaeda in Iraq at its peak, suggesting it is well positioned to reemerge if pressure on the group is relieved. And the president just relieved pressure on the group with this announcement. And even if the president's own advisors are talking about this action, we have to consider that all of them have talked almost in unison about the need to continue our support. And Brett McGurk, who has been our key point person in Iraq over many years, said basically, so obviously it would be reckless if we were just to say, well, the physical caliphate is defeated, so we can just leave now. I think anyone who's looked at a conflict like this would agree with that. And indeed, ISIS is still a very potent force, 10,000 to 20,000 personnel in Syria. And that's why our forces in Syria have been working closely with the Kurds, trying to train them up to take the role of American forces, in fact, to lead the fight, which they have. These forces are not quite ready to stand completely on their own, but they've made remarkable progress over the last several years. They've done it through their courage, their commitment, their ability to stand with and fight with our special operators, and it's something that we have to recognize. If we go through with the president's proposal, the most predictable event will be the reemergence of ISIS as a more credible, forceful entity, not only in Syria, but also in Iraq and in Jordan and surrounding regions. It'll also just completely recharge the tribal efforts and the battles that are going on within Syria. And it would be, in effect, a betrayal of these Kurdish forces. Senator Lindsey Graham has said that. I echo that sentiment. They have fought well with us. 2 or 3 years ago, when we were looking for a stable military force, very few were found. I don't think any of us believed it would be as this successful in terms of the Kurdish effort led by U.S. Special Operations Forces. If we forsake these forces, it will perhaps lead to a very bloody conflict with the Turks. They are poised to engage with Kurdish elements in Syria. Also, it will risk the security of our allies in the region, Israel, Iraq, and Jordan. I have no doubt that Assad and his minions will try to negotiate some deal and just send the message that ISIS, if you go east to Baghdad, you can do anything you want. Or if you go south to Jordan, you can do anything you want. That type of reaction would be extraordinarily detrimental, not just to Syria, but to Iraq and to Jordan. So we're looking at a serious risk of significant escalation. We're looking at a failure to grasp the simple lessons of history. You know, we did remove forces from Iraq, and ISIS constituted a fighting force that was so capable it overwhelmed the Iraqi forces and took Mosul and was on the verge of taking even more territory until we began a counteroffensive, which has been successful. But they're going to do the same thing going forward. We have to work very hard for a diplomatic solution. One of our key points of leverage in this diplomatic solution is our effective forces in Syria. Our special operators working with Kurds, working with Syrian Arabs that do not want to be minions of Assad. If we have that leverage, we can get to Geneva, get to some settlement that will allow us, under conditions that are appropriate, to leave the battlefield. We're not there yet, and this action will undermine those efforts, I think, decisively. So I would join my colleagues in urging the President to consult with his U.S. military leaders, to take the advice of the experts, and to keep faith with our partners on the ground, and to reverse this decision.
Senator Menendez.
Thank you. Well, thank you. I'm pleased to join with two of the most significant national security voices in the Senate in common cause here. I think that Christmas came early to Russia by a series of decisions the President has made. One, obviously, on this withdrawal unilaterally and in a way that is without any strategy whatsoever, onto a whole host of national security questions that have been enumerated by my two colleagues here. Secondly, with the lifting of the designation of Rusal and other Russian companies at a critical time where I'm not sure that Deripaska's ability to influence those companies is still not a reality. And then thirdly, with our total lack of action as it relates to what happened in the Kursk Straits in Ukraine and what is happening with Ukrainian Navy personnel that are under arrest and being treated as prisoners without consulate abilities to visit. It's a trifecta for Vladimir Putin at a time in which it also sends a global message that of real concerns. And so, from my perspective, having listened to parts of Putin's 4-hour end-of-the-year news conference, I can see him already prodding President Trump about, well, I applaud you for leaving in Syria, but you also said that you should leave in Afghanistan. Why don't you leave in Afghanistan? You've been there 15 or 17 years. I can see him already prodding the President. This is dangerous. This is not just simply an error, it's dangerous. And let me just speak to that a little bit. Doing this without any strategy is foolhardy, and it puts U.S. security in the Middle East, including our ally, the State of Israel, at significant peril. We're entering a very dangerous time, as is increasingly clear to all on a bipartisan basis, including our international allies and our adversaries, that this president is incapable of addressing some critical national security challenges. Only in President Trump's parallel alternate universe has ISIS been defeated. There isn't anyone who would suggest that that's the reality at this point in time. This erratic decision-making indeed poses a threat to our national security interests. And so, you know, the fact that the president tweets that Russia's not happy, I guess he didn't hear Putin's comments at his press conference. He's very happy, and he is thrilled with this abdication of U.S. leadership. I worry a great deal that we send a global message as well, as we are doing if this is executed, as the president has announced, that we are going to abandon entities like the Kurds, who have been the most significant fighters for us, not only for their interests, but for our interests in Syria. And then the global message is, once the United States is finished using you, it will abandon you. That's a global message that we cannot afford elsewhere in the world. I also get concerned for our ally, the State of Israel. Iran has entered this fight in Syria in an unholy marriage with Russia. One, to prop up Assad, yes, but also to gain a tactical vantage point on Israel's northern border, where it has moved significant equipment and sophisticated fighters, as another vantage attack against Israel. To believe that we can outsource our allies' interests to Russia, and that Russia has an agency relationship with Iran where it can tell it to leave at it will, is ridiculous. Iran shed enough blood and national treasure in its purpose here. It's not leaving until its own interests are pursued, and that means it's not leaving for any time. So I said to Secretary Pompeo when he was up for nomination before the Senate Foreign Relations Committee as the secretary, I showed him a picture that came out a few months back. It's a picture of Rouhani, you know, the Putin, and Erdogan. And I said, what's wrong with this picture? And the answer to that question was the United States isn't there. That picture was those three people thinking and leading about the future of Syria, for which we have strategic national security and national interests. We weren't there. And now we're definitely not there if this action takes place. You cannot have significant diplomatic overtures without muscle that is backed up by the realities of having those troops there and assisting the Kurds at the end of the day. So I think this is a national security threat in its ultimate decision, and joined by the fact that we haven't rolled out any sanctions on Russia for what they've done in Ukraine since our original sanctions, most significantly what happened in the Kerch Straits, where we haven't increased U.S. and NATO presence in the Black Sea, where we haven't announced any new security assistance for the Ukrainians. In each and every one of these cases, Putin has pushed and pushed and pushed, got what he wanted, and he has a very clear message that we're willing to abdicate to him. That is not in the national interest and security of the United States. So for all these reasons, I join my colleagues in urging the President to reconsider. As someone who has voted against engagement in war in other places, I don't take the commitment of U.S. troops lightly, but this is one in which the national interest and security of the United States is at stake.
Questions?
Senator Graham, you mentioned military leaders, or the President's military advisors have been advising him against this. Are you talking specifically about Secretary Mattis? I know you spoke to him about this. Can you tell us anything about those conversations and what he specifically said to President Trump about this?
Well, I won't get into conversations between Mattis and the President, but I will tell you what he told me. He thought that the time was not right to leave for all the reasons just expressed. Secretary Mattis, one of the most seasoned national security people I know. He's got a great team around him, the President does. He just needs to listen. He's very worried about the Kurds. He asked me, what are we going to do with these prisoners? You know, these are 700 approximately foreign fighters, and they're probably going to go back to the fight. I think he knows that. He told me without any hesitation that ISIS has been hurt badly, that the change in strategy to be more aggressive has paid off, but they're not defeated, and that a replay of Iraq is very likely. I talked to Secretary Pompeo he understands that the conditions on the ground are not right yet for us to leave, that the peace process does only chance of bearing fruit if you have some leverage. And, you know, Geneva's the answer here. Same, you know, reconciliation is the answer in Afghanistan. The one thing I think they've all told me is that you may get peace between the parties in Syria, but ISIS will never be at the peace table. You may reconcile the Taliban with the government of Afghanistan, but nobody in the right mind believes that you're going to get peace with ISIS. What you do is you have partners that can keep the fight over there so it doesn't come here. We've been debating walls. Well, I can tell you, you can't build a wall between us and radical Islam in the Mideast, but you can have forward deployed presence partnering with others who do most of the fighting. And if you withdraw those forces too soon, it's like taking a wall down. So I am confident, I talked to Bolton yesterday, that this decision did not come based on advice from his national security team. It came from the president himself. He has every right to make that decision, but we're urging him to reconsider. And unlike Iraq, we have a bipartisan moment here. I'm calling on Senator Schumer and McConnell to join this resolution. We're signing up co-sponsors as quick as we can. We're all hoping to leave town. But this bipartisan effort to support a resolution urging the president to change course, I think there's a lot of votes for it. And to me, John's not with us, but I think Senator McCain would be pleased that all of our differences throughout the years about where to be and what to do and how to do it, that they're behind us, at least when it comes to Syria. John's voice has been consistent, whether you agreed with it or not. We need to do more in Syria, not less. It's going to get worse if you leave and if you do nothing. And as usual, he was almost always right. But now you have a bipartisanship I have not seen before. And I hope the president will take advantage of it. We will have your back, Mr. President, if you decide to change course.
Senator Graham, there's been some reporting that President Erdogan told President Trump that the Turks were getting ready to go into Syria to go after the PKK.
Yeah.
Is any of that reflected in any of y'all's conversations with some of these other national security?
I know
due to the region, if that.
Well, I'll let my colleagues speak here, but I also have been told by our national security team they're very distrustful of Turkey. If you spend any time with the Turks, they see the Kurds as a bigger threat than ISIS. Right. Now, the YPG elements have been listed as terrorists in the past, but I can only tell you what our military says. They have been the best fighters we have found in over a decade of fighting the war on terror. They're an indispensable partner, and their fate is very much at risk here. And there is concern that Turkey will move down. The only reason they haven't come down yet, we've been around Manbij. The day we leave, it's going to be open season on every Kurd who supported us, and they're going to get hit by at least three sides. Turkey is out to get them because they consider them a bigger threat than ISIS. Assad considers them an effective fighting force that he will want to destroy so he can keep his hold over Syria, and he will be joined in that effort by Iran. And finally, those 20 or 30,000 fighters, they're going to come back like a pack of wolves. So our Kurdish friends are in a world of hurt, and I guess what we're saying, that matters to the three of us.
Senator Graham.
Yeah.
Do you agree with this memo that Bill Barr wrote?
I'll talk to you about that later.
Senator Graham, just a quick follow-up on that. Given what was just asked about the Kurds, would you support fully arming the Kurds in order to protect themselves from Turkey?
I don't know what that means. Here's what I'm telling you. The Kurds are an effective fighting force partnered with us. They don't have tanks. They don't have airplanes. And they're not going to get tanks and airplanes in the next 30 days. So this idea somehow we can leave and give them the armaments and they can fight and protect themselves is not rational. We're not going to train a bunch of pilots to have a Kurdish Air Force in the next 60 days. So I think we all understand what's coming the way of our Kurdish friends.
Another way to express this is basically one of the stabilizing, probably the most significant stabilizing influence in the area is the presence of the United States forces.
Yeah.
When those forces come out, unpredictable instability and consequences will happen, almost inevitably. It could be Turkish attacks against Kurdish elements. It could be regime attacks. But the one thing we can guarantee, the stabilizing element right now is the United States forces. When they go, you're talking about instability, and it won't be contained simply in Syria. It'll just spread throughout the entire region.
Senators, ultimately right now, you're trying to change the president's mind. That's the fastest course of action here. To do that, it probably helps understand his motivation. What do you think is motivating the president to do something that is
Good question.
different from
Well,
national security?
I think the president's had a desire for a very long time to disentangle. That was part of his platform, is to get out of the Mideast. Iraq War was a disaster. I get all that. He talks about Bush's mistakes, and they're to be talked about. Talks about Obama's mistakes. Those presidencies are over. So now this is your time. And I guess what we're saying is, as hard as it is for a Democrat to work with Trump, they're willing to do it. So I want to compliment my colleagues who are willing to stand with me and other Republicans to give the president the ability to go to conditions-based withdrawal and get political support, not condemnation. There's plenty they can talk about with Trump. They got lots of differences. But when it comes to Syria, there's sort of a magic moment here. His motivation? He's done a lot of good things in my view. He changed the rules of engagement in Afghanistan. The Taliban have been hurt. The fight has been more successful against ISIS. Getting out of the Iran nuclear deal I thought was a good thing. All that's being undercut by this. So I'm not questioning his motivations. I'm questioning his judgment. And to me, leadership is best had when you can reevaluate and make adjustments.
Let me speak to that a moment. So, look, I think this has been on the president's list. You know, he has a list, and he goes ticking it through as he moves towards 2020 about what he succeeded as. The problem is, I hope the president comes to understand that withdrawal without success is failure.
Right.
Withdrawal without success is failure. And if you think about it, what U.S. policy has been, and what it subscribes to is everything that will happen here if he withdraws is an absolute failure. Why? We said Assad can't stay. Well, Assad's likely to stay at least for a fair amount of time. Secondly, we said that in fact we have strategic interests there and that we can't allow Russia and Iran to dictate those strategic interests. Well, we leave. Russia and Iran dictate our strategic interests. And Russia builds a major foothold in the Middle East that it aspired to, that in fact it hasn't had. Now it will have it. Not only with its propping up of Assad, it's built bases there that it didn't have, and it will have a significant foothold. And number three, Iran is ultimately going to have another place of attack against Israel, which will not be deterred by Russia. So in my mind, and fourthly, we send a global message, fight with us, but when we're finished with you, we use you, we throw you away. And any place else in the world that we want someone to fight with us, and so that our soldiers, our sons and daughters are not in harm's way, they're going to look at this moment and say, wow, yeah, we fight with them until they don't need us anymore, and then we get discarded on the battlefield and we die. All of those results are horrible results. They're absolute failures. And he can avoid that by staying in the midst.
Right, two more questions.
Senator Graham, on the subject of motivation, are you at all concerned that this decision, in conflict with military advice, out of the blue, may be motivated by a desire to kowtow to Russia?
No, I'm not going to go there. No,
Have a better relationship with Russia?
No, I think it's just, he said this. There's something on the scroll for CNN. Trump said you shouldn't be surprised by this decision. Well, you know why I'm surprised is because Brett McGurk said just like 30 days ago, the war is not yet over with ISIS. Ambassador Jeffers said 72 hours ago to our Kurdish allies and others, we're going to stick through this to get a better outcome in Geneva. Yes, I am surprised. I'm not surprised that you want to get out of the Mideast. I'm surprised that you don't understand what's going to happen. If you're not aware of what's going to happen, it's like you missed the whole Iraq war in terms of how we left. I think what Bob described as 4 bad outcomes are almost certain to happen. So what I am surprised is that after having told the Kurds and everyone else less than 48 hours ago, 72 hours ago, we're not going anywhere, we're going to get a good outcome in Geneva from your envoy to Syria, having the guy on the ground who's been looking in Iraq and Syria for years say, we have not yet won the fight, having your own Secretary of Defense say they will come back if we leave. Yeah, I am really surprised that you would do this in light of all of that.
Senator, have you got any indication that the timing maybe had anything to do with not foreign policy calculations? I mean, this has been a full week of other things happening on the president's plan and the wall debate. Does the timing have anything to do with anything that's not this issue?
Well, the process of making this decision was not what you would expect. Listening carefully to your military and State Department advisors, having thorough consultation with allies, and then developing a plan. How do we execute this? How do we do this? And getting buy-in, if you will. So it was impulsive. And I think anytime you do something impulsive, it's not a rational process. It's subject to whatever other factors are affecting you at the moment. And this week has been a challenging week for the President in many other corners. I don't believe he put that all aside. I don't think he could put it aside. This was a very quick, impulsive decision, taking his advisors by surprise. So I think you cannot dismiss the fact that other influences might have affected his decision, at least the timing of the decision. He's been very clear for months he'd like to get out. But why did he do it now? Why did he do it so precipitously? Why didn't he consult with other allies? And really a detailed analysis by his own national security team. So I think there are other factors at play here, but it's so difficult to predict because they're so literally idiosyncratic.
One last, and I'm not suggesting this is designed to make Russia happy. He thinks they're not happy. He's wrong. I think he really believes that. I just think he's wrong. I don't know why Obama turned down all the advice he got, but he did. Is this to change the topic? No. I just think the president's been frustrated. He doesn't want to be over there. He wants everybody to come home. Who doesn't want our troops to come home? All of us, but we want to do it smartly. Who wants another repeat of the disaster in Iraq and Syria? None of us. I have not had one American come up to me and say, let's stop fighting ISIS because somebody else can do it for us. Nobody believes that it's smart to outsource the fight to ISIS to everybody but us. The good news is that we finally got reliable partners. We're making great progress, and we're cutting this thing off at a time when it would bear dividends politically and militarily. So I can't explain this decision. I'm not going to suggest motivations that are anything other than a frustrated president, but I can promise this, that if you follow through with this, everything that happened in Iraq is going to happen in Syria, and it's going to be worse, not better. It's going to make it harder to get the Taliban to reconcile. You're undercutting what we've done in Afghanistan. North Korea is going to see this as a sign of weakness, and it's going to be harder to get the Russians to heal, because this will be seen by the entire world as a decision not based on sound military advice, a decision based on frustration, and all of our allies are scratching their head right now. I just talked to the British. They don't know where to go. And I do know this, that in this war, you will not win it by giving up. This isn't akin to surrendering. We can be successful only if we partner with others. This undercuts that effort. We've got two choices to fight this war: in their backyard or our backyard. And ISIS in Afghanistan, I know for sure, is looking toward the United States in their target sets. Mr. President, you have a chance to change course. You have a lot of bipartisan support to do so. Take advantage of it.
Thank you.